I was seeing a few relatives during a trip I was taking across the country. They lived in a city I was passing through about halfway along my drive, so I thought it'd be nice to stop, spend some time with them, and rest before continuing on. I booked an Airbnb in their town, just a typical small home in the suburbs. Nothing fancy, nothing interesting, just a place to stay for a couple of nights. I got there really late, maybe around 10 or 11 p.m. The owner, Jay, had emailed me earlier with the passcode and instructions to get in, but as I was unloading my car in the driveway, I nearly jumped out of my skin when a man walked up behind me. It was Jay, the host. I had only been outside for less than a minute, so the timing was unsettling. At that hour, I didn't expect to see anyone, let alone the owner. He started talking casually, offered to help carry my things, and showed me into the house. I was tired and not in the mood to question him, but the whole thing felt odd. I'd stayed in plenty of Airbnbs before, and usually never even met the hosts in person. Still, I convinced myself he was probably just being friendly, maybe even new to renting out his place. He gave me a quick tour, even walked me up to the bedroom, then said goodnight and went back downstairs. I sat in the room, unpacking slowly, waiting to hear the front door open and close so I knew he had left. But after a few minutes, I never heard anything. Curious, I went back downstairs, but he was gone. I locked the door myself and went back upstairs to settle in for the night. The next day, I visited my relatives, then came back around noon. I lounged around, watched some TV, and later went out to grab dinner. But when I came back and stepped onto the porch, I froze. The front door was unlocked. I knew I had locked it. That sinking feeling returned. My mind immediately jumped back to Jay. I opened the door cautiously, calling out, "Hello? Anyone in here?" But the house was silent, the lights off. I shut the door behind me, brushed it off as me possibly forgetting, and tried to move on. I tossed the food on the table, turned on the TV, and sat down for the night. That's when I heard it. A dull thud, something hitting the wall on the other side of the house. It was faint, but for some reason it got under my skin. I couldn't ignore it. I walked toward the sound and found myself in a small, strange back room. A sofa and a nightstand, nothing else. No windows, no decorations, just plain emptiness. The room felt wrong. As I scanned the walls, I noticed something odd, a faint crease just above the couch. I pushed the sofa aside and saw it clearly. A door. Not a normal door, but a small, 3-foot hatch built into the wall. My stomach dropped. I tugged at the handle, but it was locked. What chilled me was that the lock wasn't on the outside, it was on the inside. Someone could lock themselves in. A heavy unease filled me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was behind that door. I pulled out my phone and called Jay. If he acted strange about it, I'd know something was wrong. The phone rang and rang. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I kept my eyes fixed on the front window as I dialed over and over, half expecting him to suddenly appear outside like he had the first night. After a few minutes, I gave up. Confused, paranoid, I walked back to that little room. I pressed lightly on the door again, not expecting anything. This time, it creaked open. My blood ran cold. Inside was a pitch-black staircase, old wooden steps leading down into what looked like an unfinished basement. I couldn't even see the bottom, but I did see the bolt lock on the inside of the hatch. That meant someone had just unlocked it. Recently, I stumbled back, pale and shaking. Someone had been in there. Maybe still was. I rushed upstairs, heart pounding, stuffing my clothes into my suitcases. Every sound made me whip my head toward the door, terrified someone would appear in the hallway. I was almost finished when I heard it creak, the floorboards groaning just outside my room. I froze, staring at the open doorway. No one appeared. Barely keeping myself together, I grabbed both suitcases and bolted for the stairs, not caring how loud I was. I tore down the hall, expecting at any moment for a door to swing open, but I made it to the front door, yanked it open, and sprinted outside. I didn't even close it behind me. But just seconds later, before I reached my car, I heard it slam shut on its own. I jumped into the driver's seat, heart racing, and sped off into the night without looking back. When I reached a hotel, I tried calling and texting Jay again. Nothing. No response. He completely cut me off. I can't say for sure, but I believe Jay had some kind of hidden basement under that house. Maybe a place he used to watch renters. Maybe something worse. And when I found that secret door, he knew I had seen too much. If I had gone down those stairs to see what was really down there, I don't think Jay would have ever let me leave that house alive. In the spring of 2022, I booked a small Airbnb cabin tucked deep in the woods. The property had several identical cabins scattered throughout the land, connected by faint, unmarked trails likely left behind during construction. I had nothing particular planned, just a quiet escape 3 hours from home, a chance to breathe in the stillness of the forest. On my second day, after sleeping in late, I made coffee and lingered by the fireplace. By sunset, I pulled on a hoodie and went for a walk, following a narrow trail behind the cabin. I assumed it would loop back to another cabin eventually, but the deeper I went, the more unsettling things became. Through the trees, I noticed two men standing far out in the forest, motionless, heads tilted down at something on the ground. They didn't speak, didn't move, just stared. I brushed it off, convincing myself they were other guests, and continued walking. The trail stretched deeper and deeper with no curve, no loop, nothing that felt right. A creeping unease grew inside me, and that's when I heard it. A scream, or maybe an animal call. It echoed unnaturally, like an elk's cry twisted into something alien. I spun around and froze. The two men were on the trail, closer this time, staring straight at me. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood. My heart pounded as I stepped backward. Then, without warning, they slipped off the trail into the shadows of the trees. I waited, paralyzed, before finally hurrying back toward my cabin. I told myself it was nothing, threw more wood on the fire, and tried to relax. But as night fell, the forest came alive again. That same unnatural scream echoed through the darkness. I pulled the curtains shut and searched my phone, desperate to find what kind of animal could make a sound like that. Nothing matched. My unease deepened until the creak of heavy footsteps broke through the crackle of the fireplace. Someone was on the porch. A slow knock rattled the door. Peering through the peephole, I nearly collapsed. Two men stood there in plastic animal masks, their hoods pulled up. Identical. Silent. I dialed 911 as they knocked again. Then, a loud thud shook the door. My chest seized with terror, convinced they were about to break in. But instead, I heard footsteps retreating into the woods. When the police finally arrived, they found a deep mark carved into the doorframe, like a knife had been driven into it. I left the cabin that night and never returned. To this day, I still check the news from that area, expecting to see reports of disappearances. But nothing ever comes. What those men wanted remains unknown. Last year, I received a work promotion that required frequent travel. Sometimes I stayed in hotels, sometimes resorts, and occasionally Airbnbs. One particular trip, I was assigned an Airbnb about 40 minutes from the office. I arrived close to 1 a.m. and was shocked. The place was massive, at least 5,000 square feet with a sprawling yard. Too large, too grand, to be a simple rental. Inside, however, it felt strangely outdated. I was exhausted and barely explored before collapsing into bed. But the house never slept. As I lay awake, it groaned and thumped endlessly, as if alive. Frustrated and thirsty, I stumbled downstairs for water. Oddly, the moment I stepped into the lower floor, every noise stopped. Silence. Too perfect. I brushed it off, went back upstairs, and eventually drifted to sleep. The next day passed quickly with work and drinks after hours. By the time I returned, it was late. I decided to finally explore the house. Everything seemed normal, though oddly messy, as if someone had left in a hurry. A kitchen chair sat pulled out, even though I distinctly remembered it tucked under the table that morning. I pushed it back, showered, and went to bed. Just as I began to fall asleep, the noises returned. Footsteps, cabinets opening, floorboards creaking. This time, unmistakable. My unease turned to terror as I realized the sounds weren't random. Someone was moving around downstairs. The noises stopped the moment I stepped onto the stairs. But then, I noticed something. The kitchen light was on. I knew I had turned off every light. Peering into the kitchen, my stomach dropped. The chair was pulled out again. And behind it, in the pitch-dark corner of the adjoining room, a shadowed figure stood watching me. For a long, frozen second, we locked eyes. Then, it darted back behind the corner. Moments later, a door slammed shut. I flicked the lights on, searching frantically. There was no one there. No door that could have made the sound I had just heard. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my phone, bolted from the house, and called the police. When they arrived, the host dismissed everything, acting as if I was lying. Or worse, as if he already knew. The police found no evidence, and the host insisted there were no doors where I swore I'd seen the figure vanish. The company relocated me to a hotel for the remainder of the trip, but I couldn't shake the feeling. That house hadn't been empty. Someone, or something, was in there with me. And if I had stayed one night longer, I might not have left at all.